the welfare of the Nigerian conversation around the welfare of the Nigerian police force is one that cannot be understated or overstated as the case may be. That is because this is something we deal with directly. Every day is that ourselves or our loved ones will have a police officer in the family or a friend with a police officer, and we'll see how they are treated with disregard, especially for those who are, even for those who are still in service, and also when they've passed on and when they're retired. That provision is not really, it doesn't trickle down. We know that there's Police Affairs Ministry, there's Police Service Commission, being headed by a police officer. No, the ministry is being headed by a minister that may not be a police officer. But now, look at Dr. Solomon Arase, look at the IGP. When they both came into power, there was this camaraderie between them, and we're expecting that, oh, by now, some of these issues will begin to have a policy direction. But as it is, I cannot readily sit down here and tell you that when it comes to the Nigerian police force, whether on their welfare or funding as the case may be, this is the Police Service Commission, the policy direction on the welfare of the Nigerian police force. That is with a former IGP running the Police Service Commission. Is it the legislation, or is it the inability of these retired or senior officers who are carrying out administrative functions within the Police Service Commission or even within the Nigerian police force to develop a mechanism that can ensure that, one, the Nigerian police force goes back to what it used to be, or even have an improved version of it than what it has become in recent time?
Well, it's difficult for me to even tell what the Nigerian police force used to be, because
I'll give you a typical example. I have an uncle who was a police officer. As a child, he was my best uncle, so admirable. He was always looking prim and proper, dressed. They had their branded water bottles, they had their branded, like when he's coming home, he's like a proper gentleman is coming home. It is an aberration. What I saw as a child in that my uncle, compare it to what I see in the average police officers today. And he was a corporal at the point, by the way, not even a senior at the point. So it's an aberration to what I see right now in police. That's why I said what they used to be in terms of proper organization and had that respect. When an officer stands in, oh, this is an officer. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, when I said that, it wasn't to doubt that there was once a Nigerian police force. I don't know where it is now. But I think that it's such a long time ago that it's so distant now that it's almost impossible for some people to recall what exactly that force used to be like. I think it's the same problem all over again. We throw money at problems, we don't find out how that money is spent to know exactly if we are spending it judiciously, if it's been spent for the purpose for which it was earmarked. So I'm seeing trillion naira figures all over the place being thrown around as money is meant for Nigerian police force. How much of that will get to the policeman out there? And that's where it begins and that's where it ends. Because if we don't get that right, every other thing will simply just amount to I don't know, just an exercise in futility. We don't seem to understand the importance of the police in a democracy. I mean, the police is responsible for the maintenance of law and order. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, we run to the army for things that should be discharged by the police force ordinarily, and then we are creating all kinds of barrier structures to the police force. I mean, with an effective police in place, we may not even need agencies like EFCC, because the police will have an anti-fraud unit, there is a forensic unit, and we just like multiplying agencies. And I mean, now we are talking about something like an electoral offenses commission. If we don't address the issues, and this is the issue for me, the issue is about penalties for wrongdoing. We live in a society where people can boldly, with all the impunity in the world, divert monies meant for public use to their own private ends, and then they'll just get away with it. Nothing happens. So, well, as I say, to whom much is given from him, much is expected. Frankly, I have stopped expecting much from the policemen because I mean they are not given much. So we've complained before about the fact that as you are entering the force, you're given a set of uniforms. In some cases, you don't get any other set.
And that's it.
You need to be the one to produce new ones for yourself. Now, besides the problem of burdening the policeman with his meager salaries to provide additional accoutrements for his work, you are also creating a situation where what ought to be, official material is now being produced in the open market. So, I mean, you could also then create room for fakery, for imposture, and all of those problems. But It's difficult, and it's really not down to who is the minister at this point, or who is in charge of who is the head of the Police Service Commission, or who is in charge of the Police Trust Fund. It's a systemic thing. So even if you change the individuals there and bring new ones, at the initial stage there will be the usual Nigerian euphoria when the new set of administration.
I remember a situation that occurred during the last election. A friend of mine who was a police officer was complaining 4 days after the election. Our allowance that was supposed to be given to us during the elections for going out for elections has not been given to us, and we were there when the allowance of the NYSC members were paid, all the INEC staff were paid, but we have not been paid, and we can't complain because we are police officers. You dare not go to the public and talk about your senior officer. You dare not tell the public that the DCO has not released your money, and you cannot yell at the DCO.
But
now they've earmarked 57 billion for the police trust. How are we sure that these monies would even leave the office of the trust fund?
That's a critical part.
I think it goes down to oversight now. One would expect that the National Assembly will be alive to its oversight responsibility. I'm sure the Senate has a committee on police, the House of Reps has a committee on police.
It's a committee that came up with this. Yeah.
So these joint committees should periodically bring the IGP, the head of the Police Service Commission, the head of the Police Trust Fund, for them to give periodic reports of what progress they've been making. And there should be proper auditing to ensure that, okay, the money is spent judiciously. That is often what is lacking. So oversight becomes a mechanism for blackmail. That's what that's become now. When National Assembly members want favors from the head of any of these ministry departments and agencies, and the individual is not forthcoming, they then resort to using oversight as a means of blackmail. Well, I may be generalizing, but we've seen that happen repeatedly, and it has led me to the conclusion that we pay lip service to oversight. I mean, if you take away lawmaking as lawmaking, the next most important, most critical function of the legislature is oversight. Part of what happens is that we blame the executive for recklessness in expenditure. But if the legislature is alive to its responsibility, it's going to curtail executive expenditure and executive excess. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We find legislative officers in cahoots with we now, in some cases, we even see a situation where there is really no clear-cut boundary between the executive arm of government and the legislature. That's at the root of all of this.